y'all doing? I'd like to make a quick review of a book that I just got finished reading here. I found this in a used bookstore in Oklahoma City, and it seemed very interesting. The cover appealed to me. It was a book by Steven Brust, Brokedown Palace, A Tale from the East. Now, I first got this book, I wondered, is this part of the series? No, this is a standalone novel, but it takes place in the world of a continuous series, and I'm looking at Wikipedia, because I'm not too familiar with this author. I'm sure I read maybe a couple of short stories of his, but I've never read any of his books that I know of. This is, he has what the Dragaera, sorry if I mispronounced this, Dragaeran books, which consists of like 14 novels, and it's supposed to be 19 of them all. There's another series, the Kavran romances, takes place on the same world, and according to Wikipedia here, it takes place on a planet where the world is sort of a high fantasy, particularly of a Hungarian-looking, Hungarian-based high fantasy look, but has some science fiction underpinnings. Well, after reading this, I can say I did quite enjoy it. I mean, looking at the cover art by Alan Lee, yes, that Alan Lee that you probably know from Lord of the Rings fame, it definitely draws you to it. Yes, the old saying that you can't judge a book by its cover, but a good cover should draw you into it, and should be accurate enough to tell you what to expect as far as tone and atmosphere of the world it brings you in. I mean, the cover shows a single guy, the king, statue of the the demon goddess, sorry, well, who they worship, and this very atmospheric but very old, decrepit castle. The story consists of 4 brothers. Most of the focus is on the 4th youngest brother. I'll go over the back of the book here. King Laszlo, who is the king. He's ends up being the main antagonist, so to speak. You have Prince Andor, the second brother, who's a guy just trying to find his place among the family. Prince Vilmos, who is this huge giant of him, so big and strong. They wonder, is this guy really our brother? Type of thing, but but he loves his brothers all the same. And of course, the main protagonist of the book, Prince Miklos. So the story revolves around these 4's rivalry against each other, while and mostly about the castle that they live in. This castle is 400 years old. There's a lot of history about it. Their family has ruled this, were the founders, human founders of this place, and this is the castle that was built up 400 years ago to it's everything. It held battles and everything. It's a great symbol. It's falling apart. It seems to be made of mostly sandstone, and it is falling apart. And okay, you ask, why not fix it? The problem is the youngest brother, Miklos, knows it's falling apart, and he's trying to tell his older brother, who is so stubborn. In fact, they're both kind of stubborn, but since he's the king, and he will just not hear any of it. Excuse me, for a good chunk of this book. Even when it's so flat out obvious. There's cracks everywhere. Places are, and the further you go into it, that the book constantly describes the conditions of places in it, and then that it's just worn out as hell. And then later on, there are places of it falling apart, staircases falling down, and so forth. So, and unfortunately, the book starts. Well, I say fortunate, but the book starts off between a feud between Miklos and the king. The king tells him, hey, look, I need this room for some purposes, I need to move out. And this starts a fight to where Miklos runs off, and he is not seen back for a couple years. So what happens is that, during that time, he travels around, he tries to find the land of Fairy. And he to see what he can learn from them. Along his journey, he meets a horse called a Taltos horse, a horse that can speak to him, and it will be vital, for his journey to overcome the problems between his family and the palace that they live at. The other brothers try to do what they can. I mean, Andor is a guy who's trying to find his place, so he talks to the main wizard, and he and the wizard tries to talk to him, but he, what would be symbolism or philosophy, and or just took it literally, so now he's doing his own thing. He'll eventually learn to get bored and get over it. Vilmos, the big strong guy who, again, he loves his brothers, and he cares for his little pets, but he's understanding the situation he's in, but he is, he figures it's a home's a home. It doesn't matter if it's a palace or not, as long as we're all together and so forth. But sorry for all the ums and all that stuff. With that in mind, it kind of gives you, to put the gist of the book is about the rivalry between the brothers, particularly of the youngest and the oldest, about what they should do about their crumbling home and how to go about it. And what's interesting about this book, and again, I don't know much about the writer if he does this in others, but in between each chapter he has an interlude, and there's a very small story that reads like folklore. And again, he's forged his world specifically on Hungarian folklore. In fact, the language he uses in his book is Hungarian. In fact, he gives the note on Fenarian pronunciation. Fenaria is the land that this takes place. And he begins with, in Hungarian, Fenarian. We have the world's oldest, most phonetically spelled languages, and he goes on to how to pronounce everything. A little tongue-in-cheek there. But as it's one of those that I'm glad it was a standalone novel, even though it takes place in a world where there's more books. It's standalone, and I can say I enjoyed this sort of high fantasy fairy tale feel. In fact, when I talk about the interludes, each of these stories the interludes, that's a small short story. If you think about those stories and how they're told, it's easy to take the whole story of this between the four brothers and condense it into one of those interludes. So it's like you take a small short story and expand it beyond what you are normally told as a fairy tale, and you get to know the characters and some of the rationale. If you ever look at a small fairy tale and wonder, the supposed plot holes, why did they do this and this and this? Well, as these are condensed versions, where if you expand it out, it would sort of make sense. Of course, on top of the rivalry between the brothers and trying to build it, because again, you got a very stubborn king that will not hear any of it for a good chunk of it, but later he's slowly convincing by others that, to trying to keep the brothers together, but another problem occurs. You see, somewhere in the palace, something is growing, and as it grows, it deteriorates the castle even more. So things like this sort of convinces the king that, yes, okay, we need to fix this palace somehow. Let's just reinforce everything, but that's not quite going to work, obviously. So now there's a problem between, okay, Miklos has returned from 2 years learning what he did in Land of Fairy. He's got new abilities. Could he be the one that planted this there? It's in his room where it started. And, and then Miklos is trying to help everybody here with the help of the Taltos horse, which I have to admit, as we're reading it, as he's having a conversation with it, the horse sort of speaks in riddles, about, what to do and everything. And I thought maybe it's like, okay, I know that the brothers worship the demon goddess, so and the Taltos horse says that the demon goddess is part of the problem. But then again, the way a horse is, could the horse be having alternative motives? That's how I felt. I won't give it away. But I think it's really, I found it just a very good, simple, straight novel. It's not like world building like Lord of the Rings, no epic battles, just something that contains by itself that it feels like a very extended fairy tale. And I don't know much about the world, Steven Brust's other work, particularly those set in the same world, but I can recommend this if you don't want something grand and everything. You want a sort of a high fantasy that feels like a good fairy tale. There you go, Brokedown Palace, A Tale from the East by Steven Brust. Thank you all for watching. You all have a nice day.